every year around the globe, animals unlock memories that they didn't know they had. As far as we know, migratory animals like turtles don't have conscious thoughts in the way we do, and don't necessarily recall memories in the same ways as us either. Instead, through a mixture of signals, an instinct that has been instilled with them since the day they first hatch is activated. While we don't know everything about this instinct, one thing is for sure. These animals travel across the planet following it. Let's explore how they know when and where to go, and try not to get lost. This is a loggerhead turtle. Let's call her Clementine. As far as we know, turtles don't have any form of what we call explicit memory, which is the conscious ability to recall past experiences, concepts, or information. Instead, animals seem to operate exclusively through a form of implicit memory, which is the unconscious form of memory. It's also different to instinct. But what's the difference? When you do the dishes, you don't actively remember all of the previous times you've done the dishes in order to solve the puzzle of washing under the blender blades without getting your hands all cut up. You just do it on autopilot. This is how implicit memory works, and it would appear as this is the only form of memory that most animals can create. Again, it is different from instinct though. Instinct is an innate behavior that is often triggered by an external stimulus that's with us from birth, or hatch in the case of turtles, such as the built-in instinct for loggerhead turtle hatchlings to follow the reflection of moonlight off of water to head towards the ocean. They also instinctively know how to move all of their limbs to clamber over the sand to get to water and how to swim when they get there, but they don't instinctively know where in the world they are. They need to actually form implicit memories of their location to be able to return for the breeding season, memories that are stored unconsciously. And so, every year, adult sea turtles like Clementine instinctively feel the need to travel between their nesting and feeding grounds, and they unconsciously unlock memories that they did not know that they have in order to be able to perform this incredible migration. Clementine feeds off the coast of Peru, but now an instinct calls her westward, which is interesting because while she doesn't know this direction as west, she knows which direction leads to her nesting site and how to get there across thousands of kilometers of open ocean. So, how does she know where to go? The Geodynamo. Geodynamo is the name of Earth's magnetic field. It is the one reason all life on Earth can exist if you ignore the other ones. This magnetic field exists on Earth because our planet's outer core is made of molten iron, which moves around the interior of our planet, generating a giant electrical current. And as we all learn in high school physics, electrical currents create magnetic fields, and giant electrical currents create magnetic fields the size of planets. This magnetic field forms the magnetosphere around our planet, which protects us from solar wind, and without it, our entire atmosphere would strip away, ending all life on Earth that isn't a tardigrade. Without knowing it, animals indirectly rely on this magnetic field to survive, but some have learned to harness the power of this field. And among the most magnetically sensitive animals on the planet? Turtles. The ability to detect the magnetic field is not a sixth sense as such, because, well, I've said this before, but it isn't really a sixth sense, as the majority of animals have many, many more senses than just 5, including us, but it is one of the many invisible, passive senses that we have that allow us to navigate our environment. A turtle's magnetoreception seems to be particularly strong, though. I've said magnet a lot, so let's speedrun all the magnet talk. Turtles, as well as other animals, have magnetite particles in their brains which helps create a sense known as magnetoreception, where they can determine their relative location within the magnetosphere so they can navigate their way back towards the distinct magnetic signature of the beach on which they were born, which they first store as an implicit memory when hatching in a process called geomagnetic imprinting. There is also another hypothesis though. It's mostly based on birds, not reptiles like turtles, but this hypothesis suggests that a light-sensitive protein in the eyes, with the sickest name ever, by the way, could be the origin of magnetoreception, as opposed to magnetite in the brains. Turtles, like Clementide, have this sense of magnetoreception, and they use this to follow the similar routes between their nesting and feeding grounds every year. And they need a way to cover all that distance. If you ask any 6-year-old how turtles get around, there would be a decent chance that they would say something about riding the waves. This particular scene from Finding Nemo is spot on. All turtles have Australian accents, and they really do ride ocean currents to get to where they're going. They also seem to have a pretty firm grasp of which current will take them where they need to go. Clementide arrived here in Peru by following the Tasman Front, which carried her east from Australia towards the top of Aotearoa, New Zealand, where she entered the South Pacific Gyre and travelled a great distance over to South America. So how did she know about these currents? Well, actually, this is likely another case of implicit memory instead of instinct. When sea turtles are small, they're not the strongest swimmers. They lack both the swollenness and yoke ability required to power themselves against these currents, and so to some extent, they're carried along with them whether they like it or not. The flow of these currents is then locked in as an unconscious memory, allowing the turtles to travel the same long distances that they did when they were young by finding the same currents. Clementide traveled to the coast of Peru this year, as she has for many years, in order to feed. The water here is especially nutrient rich. Why, I hear nobody asking? It's kind of an interesting and brief little side quest. So, the Peruvian coast creates a lot of coastal upwelling. Here, the wind tends to blow nearly directly parallel with the coastline, which creates a net movement of the surface water at nearly exactly 90 degrees away from the coast. This pulls the nutrient-rich water from the bottom of the ocean up to the surface, resulting in an all-you-can-eat seafood buffet for entire ecosystems, and turtles travel here to take part in that. Good job!
Side quest complete.
Now that Clementide has fed, she will head north up the Peruvian current to the South Equatorial current, completing the circle of the South Pacific Gyre. Now, although it might not seem like it, this journey from one side of the largest ocean on Earth to the other side of the largest ocean on Earth takes a while. Clementide will eat along this journey, even though some of these turtle migrations seem to pass through what we refer to as ocean deserts, or dead zones, where food and even oxygen is very scarce. The largest of these deserts sits at the center of the 5 major ocean gyres. As the currents carry things around them, and once nutrients or oxygen enters the center of the gyres, it has a hard time moving or becoming a part of a natural ecosystem. The center of these gyres are also the locations of our giant garbage patches, as the plastic and other pollutants humans generate get stuck in the middle of the revolving currents. This poses a huge threat to many animals and kills the dead zones even more, leaking this absence of food into the waters around them and spelling death for animals that do migrate through these areas, not just turtles, but whales, albatross, and many more. Loggerhead turtles tend to spend more time in the open ocean than most species of sea turtle, and also migrate further. The other species known to spend a lot of time in the open ocean, of course, is the leatherback, which is by far the largest species of sea turtle and spends most of its life in open ocean. But the currents and the magnetoreception aren't perfect forms of navigation, and turtles often drift off course. To solve this, they need a way to reorient themselves. Sea turtles can hold their breath for up to 7 hours at a time, which helps them get some sleep. They spend a median of around 9 hours at a time resting, and then when it's time to move again, they just have to figure out where they are to continue the journey. They've got that magnetoreception to help them, of course, but worst case scenario, all they have to do is look to the horizon. Evidence from a study by one Dr. Takahiro Shimada suggests that sea turtles navigate with the sunrise. The sun rises in the east and Clementine is heading west, so the theory goes that if she ends up in a magnetically unfamiliar area, she could default to just swimming away from the sunrise. This could work in many different ways, but if you recall earlier, there is also that hypothesis that magnetoreception could come from a particular form of light-sensitive protein in the eyes. It could also be that turtles, birds, and maybe other migratory species have eyes that are especially sensitive to polarized light, which is particularly high during sunrise. However this sense happens, it is a relatively grounded theory, given that we know turtles definitely follow moonlight when they first hatch. How do we know this? Well, as the most heart-wrenching scene in any nature documentary showed us back in 2016, a lot of baby sea turtles that hatch on what have become urban beaches are now following street lights towards cities and losing their lives by falling into sewers or being run over by cars. It's not all awful though. There is some incredible work being done by many sea turtle volunteers around the globe. And if you want to support some of them, I've put a link to donate to both the Barbados Sea Turtle Project and the Australian Sea Turtle Foundation in the description below. It looks as though turtles may navigate using their eyesight despite not having great eyesight at all. There is one sense that turtles do have that might surprise you to hear actually helps them navigate. The scent of water is not just Guillermo del Toro's best work. Sea turtles actually gain what we call olfactory cues from the ocean around them. It's the ability to smell chemical signals from other animals or our environment. Different sections of the coastline can smell different to sea turtles, and this helps them understand where they are in relation to their final destination. Olfactory cues can actually be powerful in many species, including humans. For example, this weirdly sexist study from 2018 has shown that human women have lowered stress levels when exposed to the scent of their romantic partners. For me personally, I vividly recall the experience of walking to and from school when I smell rain drying on a footpath, and through conversation with someone from South Africa, they told me how they had a similar experience, but it was raindrops drying on arid ground. So through my own not super scientific studies, I've deduced that these are conscious memories being formed by our own experiences that we recall through scent. Turtles like Clementine do the exact same thing, except as we've already established, turtles use unconscious memory to recall these olfactory cues. This is potentially the final clue that will get Clementine to her destination, and these unconscious memories will have taken her across the largest ocean on Earth to this beach where she first hatched, but has no conscious recollection of. It's entirely possible that as the study of memory evolves over time, only some of what we've talked about today turns out to actually be true. It could also be impossible to tell forever. It is incredibly difficult to understand another person's ability to perceive or recall information, let alone an entirely different species. Most of what we know about memory and navigation in other animals comes from behavioral clues, rather than being able to study and understand how memories work in the brain, and so we're left confident in a few things. 1. We know that turtles can read the magnetic field, somehow. 2. We know that something calls turtles to the beach where they were born. And 3, at the highest level, we know that turtles, like Clementine, have some form of memory, but that it probably isn't a conscious form of memory, and they don't actively recall memories from their past in the same ways we do. Or at least, as far as we know. The ability to detect the magnetic field is not a sixth sense.